What's up, guys? I'm gonna do a quick video here about psychedelic drugs. Woo, it sounds fun, right? So, I titled this video, Choose Z versus Other Psychedelics. And normally all I really have for a video before I begin is the title, which pops into my head. And then I'll just riff off of that. So, Choose Z is a psychedelic drug in Philip K. Dick's book, The Three Stigmata of Palmer Eldritch. And I already did a video regarding the ideas in that book, which I'm sure is somewhere tucked away in the library of shit on my profile. And in that video, I talked about this idea of other dimensional entities. But in this video is going to be something entirely different. So in that book, there's a drug called Choose Z. And Choose Z is a drug loosely based on LSD, which Philip K. Dick used to sort of demonstrate his criticisms of the traps and mystical dead corners that people get into with psychedelic drug use. And what Choose Z does is when you take it, it creates a virtual universe. And the danger is that you may be able, less and less so, to distinguish between this virtual universe that's created from this experience and the one you began in. And eventually you're not sure which is which. So, the reason I draw from a lot of Philip K. Dick's ideas, I think he uses really good symbols for us people with modern minds that still connect to deep layers of our biology and our mind stuff. I want to relate Choose Z to actual psychedelic drugs and how they affect people and what their use may be, because my path or process involved a lot of psychedelic drugs, and I'm not going to deny that. And so I feel like this may be one of the influences that makes my approach a little bit more radical and reality bending in general. Is because my teacher wasn't a guru, it was a mushroom that I interfaced with alone in my basement for a few years, pretty frequently as a sort of practice. And it was only after that I got into meditation or yoga and the other bullshit that you think you have to get into. But looking back in a non-biased way on all the follies and also victories of that process stuff, ups and downs, I'm able to see what Philip K. Dick is getting at. Yeah, although Philip K. Dick himself, from what I understand, only took psychedelics a few times. But we all have a different requirement to fulfill our understanding of our own psychophysical organism station. I really like the definition of the value of psychedelics that the teacher Junpo Roshi, also called Dennis Kelly, gave in his book The Heart of Zen. And then in that book, he just says the basic value of psychedelics is that they make you experience something different. And believe it or not, I really like simple definitions now and then. And the reason that's so valuable is because we've basically been given a template or rubric of what is right or wrong for us to experience by the cultural programming system, which includes education, organized religion, all politics, both sides, and all utilization of economic interests towards those cultural interests. And that has actually conditioned our nervous system entirely to only perceive a slim spectrum of what the senses are actually picking up. So, getting to the value of what I think psychedelics are, I think the main value is what Junpo Roshi said, just that they make you experience something dramatically different. If you can experience something dramatically different, it shows you what you're used to from a different perspective. And that's the value. The danger is when people take that different experience and make it into something more solid than it is. So they come back to their ordinary living experience and say, oh, this experience is an illusion. I saw it from this other experience that was more real. And that's when any psychedelic, whether it's fucking DPT, mushrooms, LSA, peyote, whatever, if you use it that way, it's going to become just like choosy, and that is going to create a virtual universe based on a very dramatic impression in your nervous system that was created by this experience. So what I mean by that is this experience is so intense, can be so intense, right? And it's so odd in its comparison to your ordinary experience, or can be, that impression has sort of grafted itself onto the nervous system in the same way that the cultural education system has grafted itself onto your nervous system. And then that becomes just a new hallucination that you carry with you. And I posted a few days ago, and I think it's valuable, so I'll repeat it, that a mystical experience stops meaning anything the moment it's over with. Because actually what you're trying to do is rewire the basis of all your different possible perceptions, not find a new or better perception to compare all your perceptions to, not find a new virtual universe to compare all your ordinary experience to. So I've always resented the association with psychedelics that they're hallucinogens, for the reason not that there's no hallucination involved, but the conceit that what we're ordinarily experiencing doesn't involve just as much hallucination. And so I think that's where it gets tricky, is that we're coming from a hallucination when we take a psychedelic. The hallucination is our own mind and the false identity created from thought and conditioned perception, conception, belief, so on. And the danger is, well, while that's still there, if you're taking something which is, I like that the Stanislav Grof, a psychedelic scientist or psychologist, excuse me, or not, fuck that. He said psychedelics are non-specific amplifiers. So if you have this material in your nervous system already from the culture, which is constantly producing an experience of life, which is a hallucination in itself, you have the danger of it simply amplifying that in an odd way, creating various vistas and images and visions and mythopoetic processes, which are really just dramatic up-levelings of the process of trying to get this cultural information out of your system. And there's all sorts of mythologies all throughout the world which are just depictions of the struggle going on in the human being between the innate natural biochemical intelligence and also this cultural input. And when you take a psychedelic, my experience is that, especially with the natural quote-unquote psychedelics, like plant psychedelics or fungi psychedelics or cacti psychedelics, is that your nervous system is going to use this tool to try to kick out the cultural influence, which is deadening its perception. And actually, some things you experience on psychedelics, which I've said before, like the heightening of the senses, or the sort of HD vision, as some people call it, and so on. Those aren't really hallucinations at all. Actually, what's happening is that the cultural input that we call mind in our body is being momentarily shut down. And when that shuts down, all the energy that we're draining from our body by reinforcing thought and belief and various patterns of cosmology in our heads isn't being used anymore, so the body can use it again to do what it's meant to do, which is to heighten its senses and be aware of the direct surroundings. But when you take a psychedelic and end up conversing with a entity from another dimension or go into some dramatic mystical breakthrough about the reality of things, I'd say it's a very dangerous thing to take that as too real when you come back. And I've seen people who have been completely stunted in their day-to-day progress towards truth and self-actualization by specifically DMT, an example, or LSD too. And I don't mean to single them out, but it's just been my experience. I've spent a lot of time in the psychedelic community, and it's been my experience that those, for some reason, seem to act the most like choosy, and that they generate these experiences that are so unrelated to ordinary life, but also so convincing that it ends up being a detriment because it becomes a source of fascination with something which isn't related to your day-to-day experience. And the only thing that's going to be of value to your day-to-day experience is something which transforms your day-to-day experience. But it doesn't transform your day-to-day experience to have this otherworldly breakthrough other than just making you fascinated with this. This is what I've seen. Not really sorry, but metaphorically sorry if I'm stepping on any toes. But that's what I've seen. A fascination with these experiences, an addiction to otherworldly experiences that comes out of DMT and so forth. Not all the time, because everybody can use these things in the individual way, because it depends on individual biochemistry. But it's just been a propensity I've seen, a generalness. And so I'd say that's the danger, is that when you have an experience which is so convincing but so different from the ordinary experience, it may wipe out the illusions that were there to begin with, but it's going to replace them with new ones, because just as our normal cultural way of thinking actually is not related to our direct sensory experience, I'll repeat that, our normal cultural way of thinking is not related to our direct sensory experience. It's a hallucination, just as much as anything else. It might wipe that out to have one of these breakthroughs, but it could just as easily replace it with a new virtual choosy like universe that you live in. And you live in a sort of fascination with these experiences. Speaking from experience, of course. So when I got to the point where I could finally outgrow attachment to my psychedelic experiences, I started to see them more as a way, not an end within themselves at all. For a very reason that I said before, that a mystical experience only means something while it's occurring, because the goal of it is not to develop a new viewpoint, is to replace and rewire the mechanism for which you're perceiving at all. And that brings me to another point on how do psychedelics work, what's going on there. And as I said, a lot of mythology, a lot of cosmology is actually based on the dynamics between the forces of our split off dualistic mind in our body, the cultural input, and the innate biocellular intelligence, which wants to live out its own purpose regardless of what this mind is saying. Just as that's true, when you take a psychedelic, it's actually not the innate effects of the drug which are most prominent, I feel like. It's actually the way the intelligence in your central nervous system is using the dramatic brain changes and biochemical alterations to direct these processes. So it's not the drug that's causing this experience so much as your own body. But because everything your body experiences is already being hijacked and corrupted by the belief systems put into you by the culture, there's a danger of having it break down and then having the culture take that information and make a new delusional system out of it. And that would be the correlation between Philip K. Dick's Choose Z drug and the 3 stigmata of Palmer Eldritch and these other psychedelics. So just a quick rambly little video. Freedom to all beings. Hope you are jiving.